We live in a very RGB heavy world. So what happens when a brand says, nah,
Frick.
that? You get this. The Nucleus AIO CR360 Dark.
Frick.
Your RGB.
Hey, Jay. Jay. Jay.
What?
We got work to do.
Yeah, I'm playing World of Warships. Yeah. World of Warships is the free-to-play naval strategy game where you command the most iconic and famous warships from World War I and World War II, recreated with stunning detail and accuracy. Build your fleet while participating in various game types while upgrading your ship's arsenal along the way. New players who sign up using my link below will receive an exclusive starter pack to get you up and running quickly by receiving 7 days premium time, 1 million credits, 300 doubloons, and the Tier 5 premium ship, the Exeter. So what are you guys waiting for? Start sinking ships with World of Warships by heading to the description below and getting your freebies. Yeah, I mean, obviously, sensationalism aside, we have slowly but surely over the last decade turned into a pretty RGB heavy world. And let's face it, RGB, although customizable and allows you to just make your colors whatever you want them to be, you don't have to be stuck with any particular color, like blue LEDs, red LEDs, white LEDs, and green LEDs were what you could pick back in the day, and that was it. You were stuck with those. But the over marketing and the additional cost associated with most things having RGB now have just made people completely, utterly sick of it. So even though we've already taken a look at the EK Nucleus 360 AIO, I want to see what this looks like, because what you're also going to gain is a simpler wiring setup, because you don't have to deal with ARGB cables. Now, the Nucleus does use the standard ARGB 3-pin header that you would find on your motherboard, which is also pretty universal with any sort of ARGB splitter. There should not have to be any sort of additional wiring there. So all we should have is one pump wire, allowing us to power the pump, and then our 3 fan wires, which probably go to a splitter, and then you have one header going into either your CPU header, AIO header, high amp header, wherever, or a fan controller, or however you want to do it. So the other thing I really love about the Nucleus AIOs, and one of the reasons why I wanted this, is we are using one on our test bench, specifically our AMD test bench, and it is the RGB version, is the fact that it's essentially the same in terms of performance. It just isn't going to have the ARGB on the pump, which is just a ring, and it's not going to have their ARGB fans. So in terms of sockets that it supports, pretty much all Intel sockets. So you've got LGA 1150, 1151, 1155, 1156, 1200, 2011, 2011-3, 2066, and the new 1700. And for AMD, it works for AM4 and AM5. They're basically the same fans that we saw already. Their blade design is very much intended for high static pressure for obvious reasons. These are sitting on a radiator. And the last one we took a look at actually was not in retail packaging, so this will be kind of nice to see. So we get a little welcome packet here, which is exactly the same as the one we got in our, what was that, a Pelican case type of marketing deal. We have a illustrated manual to give you all of your installation instructions for whatever socket you're going with, and as well as getting everything plugged in and such. What I like about their manual is they just go black and white with the EK orange, drawing your attention to what that step is specifically referencing. So although a full color manual is nice, the orange definitely makes it nice to be able to recognize what it is that they're saying. Hey, this is the thing. This here is just, just EK stickers. I'm grown up, so I don't care about stickers. Okay, so here are the fans. So as you can see right here, they've got this, I feel like there's a better solution they could have come up with, this loose wire chilling here. But you can see here it's got an input and an output wire. These are just going to connect together, and you're going to have one cable that's going to connect these to whatever it is that is powering your fans. They are 25 mil thick, which is kind of noteworthy because of the fact that everyone these days has kind of started moving to 30 mil and now 35 mil thick fans. We do have rubber, there's one missing right there. So rubber. So there's not one there. Yeah.
Huh.
Okay. Nope, nothing down in there. I think that's just the defects. EK, what the heck, man? How's that gonna make it through QC? This is a premium product. This, and by premium, I mean they charge a lot for their stuff. EK has a very high opinion of themselves, and so they charge accordingly. That's not okay, no matter what planet you live on. There's nothing down in there. That just straight up made it that way through. All right, that's highly disappointing right there. All right, this is gonna be all of our mounting material. It's exactly the same as we saw in their press kit. I love the hardware. So here's that wire I told you about. This is going to plug in to the fans, well, to one fan, and then the other fans will daisy chain to each other. So here is the plug that is opposite of the fan, or goes on the fan side. This goes into your, it can go into a 3-pin non-PWM if you want. It'll just be more DC controlled at that point, but PWM to control all 4, or 3, or 2, or how many you got. So there's one wire. This is actually a wrench. That is designed to take these. These are the standoffs that will have your cap and your spring. So your spring would go on, like your block would go on there, then your spring, and then your cap to screw that down. But if you have to mount this down to either your back plate or the motherboard retention bracket or whatever, this is your, because it sucks trying to get your fingers down in there in between the boards, especially with the amount of like heat sinks and stuff there are now in VRMs with these high power CPUs. It's really hard to get your fingers in there. So get that down on there and you can use that to tighten it up. But I love that all the hardware is black. That's awesome because of the fact that it's just not gonna stand out. It really leans into the dark theme, even though the RGB ones are also black as well. Here's all of our mounting screws. This is gonna mount either both our fans to the AIO radiator, or through the case, through the fan into the rad, or if you have the fans on one side and then you're mounting it to the top of the case, it has the short screws so that you can mount it to the top of the case with your fans on the bottom side. I wish they gave more thermal paste than this, or you could just do yourself one better. Go ahead and just toss the EK stuff aside and then get yourself some either KP Extreme, Kingpin cooling solution stuff, or you can go with like Cryonaut Extreme or something from Der Bauer, some of the best stuff on the market. We've got all our solutions depending on what we're installing it in. So we have a top plate, which is gonna go on the pump side. This is Intel, this is AMD. As it said, this is gonna work with AM4, AM5. This is gonna work with all your different Intel sockets that are non-2011, 2011-3 or 2066. Those are Intel Extreme platform, X99 and X299. Those are gonna thread directly into the CPU retention bracket because those are not threaded through the back of the motherboard. This, however, the holes are elongated to account for all the different spacings of the different Intel brackets, and then they will just use this guy right here, which will go on the back of the motherboard. This is plastic, nylon material maybe. This means anti-short. They want to make sure that there's any tall solder joints, because some of the solder joints are just really long as the pick and place machine is putting them in and they get soldered. Sometimes there's a big joint that sticks way down the bottom. This just keeps it from having any possibility of shorting by having it be plastic. These used to just be metal. So this is not just your standard Exeter design. This is bespoke by EK. It's not just your standard run-of-the-mill Exeter rebrand. It is designed from the ground up. Oh, hey, check this out. I forgot about that. The thermal paste is extra. So already it's pre-applied. So the thermal paste is extra in case you screw up, but I still recommend using a high-end thermal paste. Not to say what they have is bad, it's just we've seen over time how long the thermal paste lasts with the higher end, more boutique brands of thermal paste without cracking over time is really handy. So as you can see here, I'm gonna go ahead and take off one side of the peel because I'm probably gonna put this on one of my test benches here soon. It is a matte black Radiator. If you look at where the braided tubing goes into the rad, it's got this kind of a polished chamfered edge on there, which is super unnecessary, but this is neat to see. I've had people ask me, what is this? This you don't need to worry about. This is where they vacuum fill the unit. So all these units have to be filled, right? There's no port anywhere on here. This has a rubber stopper in there and then it's threaded on the inside. This is where they have a specific tool that they will thread in there and has a vacuum fill so that they can pull a vacuum in here and then open the valve with the fluid and then the fluid gets pulled in to the device. Same way they would fill like a radiator cooling system on a car. But what I wanted to show you here is just how nice just overall the radiator looks. Okay, that's kind of funny. Their plastic just straight up yanked the serial number off. So we have half a sticker left. And one thing that's a little different with this versus the ARGB unit is the ARGB unit, instead of having these kind of standoffs right here, it was a solid piece right there. It was like an L shape. And then when you would put the fans on there, they just went flush with that L shape. So this is what this one looks like, how you can see the end of the fans and the fill tube and all that, or the vacuum fill. The RGB one, for whatever reason, it's a totally different radiator. So I'm wondering why they made that choice, unless there was maybe some sort of a redesign of the radiator. I watch too much Vice Grip Garage to say radiator, but whatever. What I like about this is you can see there's 4 magnets in the corner right there. So back in the day, however you mounted it, that's how it had to go. So if your logo isn't the right way, it's just magnetic. You pop it off and turn it. It's little things like this that have definitely helped over time. But if you look right here, you can see on the bottom of the pump, there's 4 screws, and those are the screws that the bracket mount to. So there's our AMD bracket, and then here is our Intel bracket. Those just screw down with 4 of the screws that are included in the hardware kit. Some AIOs for a while there only came supporting Intel because AMD was not that popular. And by that popular, I mean, we're talking with that era between FX and when Ryzen 1 first came out. There was still this whole period of like, are people going to adopt it? Yes, they did, in hindsight. But anyway, here's the one plug I was talking about that comes for the pump. So the pump is also powered by a PWM wire that you would plug into either your CPU header or your AIO. If you have an AIO header on your motherboard, I highly recommend you plug the pump into that and not the CPU header or any other header. The reason for that, a lot of modern motherboards are trying to utilize a 0 RPM or a extremely low RPM feature built into the PWM logic that when not under load, it reduces the noise of the system. The problem is it could reduce the pump voltage down to a voltage where the pump doesn't run. If your pump isn't running, your CPU gets no cooling, which would mean thermal shutdowns, or as it starts to get hot, then it kicks it up and then your pump starts running and it goes cold. And because if you've ever noticed water cooling, if you stop the pump, the temps start to rise really quickly, like 2 to 3 C a second. And then as soon as the pump kicks on, if there's any movement of the fluid, it shoots right back down. So you'll find it going vroom, vroom, vroom. If you plug it into the AIO header, motherboards automatically know, or should automatically know, it's a water cooler. Don't shut it off or go too low on the voltage. Like 50% is as low as it should go. So just a little fun fact there. But what I'm gonna do real quick is I'm gonna go ahead and mount up the fans. I'm gonna mount up the wires and we'll see what it looks like put together. Because look, you guys have been saying, no more RGB, no more RGB. And that's what they're giving you here. I think the downside is you guys are expecting no more RGB, reduce the price. No more RGB, reduce the price. And reducing the price that doesn't. Actually, if anything, they probably charge you more. So this is what's gonna make this probably one of the easiest AIOs to install. The only screws I've had to do so far were mounting the fans, as you can see, to the AIO. And by the way, I wanted to check for centered labels. They're pretty good. Never gonna be perfect, but when they're spinning, they're pretty straight. We have this one cable coming off, which I plugged in, and they get pretty good length too. That just has to make it to a header, so that will clearly make it to anywhere on the motherboard. I feel like they could have come up with a smaller solution for this, honestly. They really just look like, you know what this looks like to me? Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me this doesn't look to you like the 12 volt high power version of a PCI Express plug, like 8 pin. Anyway, moving on. One cable for the pump. You get this up in your system. You can see those wires are hidden. This will be going down the backside. Once you get your bracketry and everything on here that you need for your CPU, you've got one wire and it's plugged in. That's it. It is stupid simple to get this thing installed. Now, as far as we can tell, with the exception of the aesthetic difference on the radiator, they appear to be the same. They appear to be the same FPI. Both radiators are aluminum fin with aluminum end tanks and stuff, and I know that scares people because galvanic corrosion. As long as the fluid is formulated specifically for mixed metals, it'll be fine. So there are AIOs that have had corrosion issues in the past, and that's because they probably used the wrong kind of fluid. Anyway, moving on. Much beefier pump design than a standard Exeter pump. which is nice. I said a minute ago, I'm like, I bet you anything they would charge more for this just because people don't want the RGB. It's actually pretty impressive. Price-wise, it's $160 for the CR360 Dark. 160 US dollars. Now it's not cheap, but it's definitely cheaper than a lot of, I get all these AIOs you see sitting right here that I have RGB on. I've got a Corsair one, I've got an Antec one, I've got an Asus one, and I've got a NZXT one, are all more than $160. Now their Nucleus 360 Lux, which is their RGB version, is $205. So $45 for the RGB, And I say that because there's probably some slight variance in the fan design. Like this frame definitely feels a little bit cheesier or cheaper than the ARGB fans, but you know what? Doesn't matter. Who cares what the frame is like? As long as it's mounted down, the bearing type is decent, and the fans are not gonna die, which they appear to be the exact same hub type and bearing type. They just don't have the clear fan blade and the RGB built into there. And we don't have the RGB ring built into here. You say 45 bucks. Get yourself a really solid performing cooler for your AM5 or 13th or 12th gen CPU, which could definitely use the cooling help for 160 bucks. We reached a day where I'm excited about $160 AIO being cheap. Actually, it's not cheap. It's just, I think the price is fair. Given the quality, it's not just an Asetek rebrand. People are just sick of RGB. I like RGB, but do I like it $45 worth? Yes, I do, but most of you probably might have a different opinion. So put your opinion down below. You guys have been asking for this kind of stuff. The brands, at least EK, has started listening. I know some of the other brands have started coming out with dark, lightless, light, non-illuminated stuffs. All right, guys, sound off down below how you guys feel about this. Of course, we'll see you guys in the next one.